This session will cover GraphCOGO. The objectives here are to create and store elements and horizontal chains using graphical coordinate geometry tools. And GraphCOGO is a tool that provides you with the ability to store coordinate geometry elements into the GPK file, points, curves, lines, spirals, chains. All of this information can be stored using the GraphCOGO tools. Let's go into a MicroStation file and look at how we use these tools and how to access these tools. If we go first of all to geometry, we can access the GraphCOGO tool. It's the tool right next to coordinate geometry. If we select GraphCOGO, we're going to have to start our COGO, open our COGO. We also get our GraphCOGO toolboxes. And we're going to, if you hit the little arrow here to the right, we get all of the tools that are in this particular toolbox, but we're going to open these all as toolboxes and look at them individually. Our store element box, our modify element, our manipulate, and finally our groups. Now, let's first look at our store elements. And this, the first tool gives us the ability to store a point. If we select that particular tool, you'll notice that it automatically gives us an ID of P1. We have two options as far as how to select this. We have our Cartesian, which means that we can, if we know the northing, easting, or XY coordinates and the elevation, we can put that information in here, type it in here. Or if we just move our cursor into the screen, we can place a point on the screen at that particular location. Now you'll notice it automatically auto increments to P2. The second way of storing a point is the Curvilinear Method. And this will require a stored chain, a chain that's already been stored. We can pick a station and an offset and an elevation and store it at that location. Now, if we go back to our navigator, you'll notice that P1 has been stored. We're going to go ahead and delete that point. It tells us that redefine has to be on. And the reason redefine has to be on to delete that point is because that point is now a COGO element. Now we also have the ability to go in and store equally spaced points. And what we do is come in and say how many points we want to store. We want to store 5 points. The first point has to be a point. In other words, what that allows us to do is this. If we go in and store our points first, and I'm going to do it by curvilinear, or by Cartesian, excuse me. We're going to store a point here, and we're going to store point 2 over here. Now if we come and say equally spaced points, and we say 5, the first point is going to be P1. The second point is going to be P2. Right? And we can do this, if we want to do this, we can actually select the points from the screen. You'll notice that it has stored 5 points. 1 point here, the ending point here, and 5 points in between. And now it auto-incremented to P8. If we go into our navigator, you'll notice that our points 1 through 8 or 7 have been stored. And we'll go ahead and delete those points. We can locate point. For instance, if we have a point stored here, P2, P1 rather, we can go in and say I want to locate a point. I want to locate point 2, this distance and this direction. It says, and identify, the bottom left-hand corner will always give you a prompt as to what action it wants next. In this case, it says identify first point. So I'm going to identify that point, accept it. And there is the second point placed at that particular location. Now we can also place store a line from existing points. So if we want to store a line between those 2 points, store a line between existing points, the first point, I can go in and put a cursor here, select my first point, which is P1, and we can put in our second point as P2. And when we hit enter, it has stored a line called L1 between those 2 points. We can also, let's move this back over here. We can also store a line between by 2 points. In other words, start a point here, end it here, and it stored a line. We have now P3 and P4. We can store a tangent line, a 3-point curve, give it the radius, hit it. Follow the prompts here, enter the start point, enter the end point, and then enter the 3-point. And there's our curve, 200-foot radius. We can also store a curve by center, a tangent curve constrained, and a tangent curve unconstrained. For instance, the tangent curve constrained with the radius 200, length 100. It says identify the element. So we'll come in here, identify an element, accept the element, hit a data point, another data point, and there's our curve stored, a radius of 200 and a length of 100. We also have the ability to store spirals with this tool. Now let's look at some of the other options we have with this tool. I'm going to go back into our navigator. We're going to get rid of some of the things that we've established because I want to redo these and go in and look at the other tools. Now if we don't know what curve that is, we can go in and say ID, select it, and it will tell us that it's curve C3. All right. So what we can do now, first of all, let's go in and store some points. We're going to go in and store point P1, and we're simply going to do this by Cartesian, and we're going to place some points on the screen. P1, P2, P3, P4, and P5. Now what this is going to represent is just 5 PI points, and after we've done this we're going to go back and we're going to say we're going to store lines from existing points. So we're going to select this. We're going to select P1, P2, hit enter, and it stores there. P2, P3, enter, P3 to P4, and P4 to P5, and then we're going to go back to P1. We're going to close this. Right. So now what we have is we have 5 points, we have 5 lines. We're going to take this as a parcel, and this is the course of a parcel, but this is not stored yet as a parcel, so we're going to go over here and say store parcel in our groups box. We're going to call this par1. Type is going to be a parcel. We have options to do a building, easement, a taken area, or occupied area. We're going to create it. We're going to do this manually. We have the option to do it automatically or flood the area. And if we pull down the little arrow here, we also have the option to go and put in the owner's name, any type of improvements or attributes that this particular parcel has. We can add that to the parcel. But the prompt down here at the bottom left side says identify the element. So we're going to come in and identify this element, accept it, identify, accept, all the way around. Okay. You'll notice when we accept the last line, we get arrows. The arrows are for direction. Which way do we want to create, which direction do we want to create this parcel? And we are going, if we hit a reset, it actually changes the direction. We want to do this in a clockwise format, or create this clockwise. And so we're going to leave these arrows in this particular shape or configuration, and then we're going to hit another data point to accept. The next thing it wants us to do is a beginning point, a point of beginning for this parcel. We're going to select this point right here, and the parcel is created. You'll notice now it increments to PAR2. So let's go into our coordinate geometry box, our COGO box. It says down at the bottom, PAR1 is stored. If we go to our navigator and we change this to parcel, we select parcel, we say a print describe. There are our parameters for the parcel. Now, we also have the ability to go in and store a alignment with these tools. What I'm going to do is delete that parcel. Delete my points. Close this. And we're going to create some lines. We're going to use these tools at the top. Store line by 2 points. So if I come over here and we're just going to do a very simple alignment. Store a line here. Another one here. And another one here. So we have basically established 3 lines and 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 points, because when we come to this particular location, you'll notice that there are 2 points stored at the same location, PT and P3, P2 and P3. So the next thing we have to do for this to be in alignment is we have to store some curves. And what I'm going to do in here is utilize this construct fillet tool. And we will go in and say C3, that's a good place to start, truncate both. We'll kind of zoom in a little bit so we can see. We'll make this let's make it 300. Select, choose and accept the first line, choose and accept the second line, and there is the curve. And then we may need to make this a little bit larger. And let's go in and delete that. Let's go to curves. Let's delete that curve. And you'll notice it left those points there. Now what we can do is we can extend those lines. We can extend them to intersection. These are the same basic tools, the modified tools that we have in MicroStation, with the exception that when we use these modified tools, we are modifying COGO elements. And therefore, the redefine button in COGO needs to be activated. So let's do this, extend to intersection. We'll hit this line, accept it, this line, accept it, and then it brings those points back to that particular point. Now, what I'm going to do is actually do a fit here, get this in the middle. I'm going to go back and try this fillet tool again, and this time we'll use, let's try 1200 foot radius. Truncate both. It truncated it. Now you'll notice that what it did is that it moved those points back to the PC and PT of the curve. So those identical points at the intersection are now moved back to identify the PC and PT of the curve. So we're going to do the same thing over here, only we're going to make this a 2,000 foot radius. Select the first one, accept it, the second one, accept it, and now we have our lines. Now, what we did here is we have established some elements, some MicroStation COGO, some Geopak COGO elements, and now we want to store this chain. And we're going to call the chain CHN1, give it a beginning station of 10, and we are going to follow the prompt down here. It says identify elements, so we're going to identify this element, accept it, and you'll notice now that it has gone all the way through these elements, and it gives us that same little set of arrows to establish the direction. And this direction is fine. This is the way we want it to go, from left to right, and so we're going to hit a data point to accept. And now we have established or created, if we look at our COGO box, we have established a chain CHN1 has been stored. If we go to our navigator, go over here to chains, CHN1, say describe, and there's the information for our chain that we just established. Now, once again, we haven't looked very much at these modified tools, but we have basically the same tools. These are the same tools that we have with MicroStation, with the exception that they are modifying or manipulating COGO elements. We have the partial delete, extend, the trim elements, the intersect elements, the extend to intersection, elements to intersection. We have the the circular fillet and the chamfer tool, and we have the cut element. Cut element will do basically what the partial delete does, but there's nothing deleted. It just breaks an element into two elements. Then we have the manipulate tools. We can move a plan element, rotate it, copy parallel, and delete that element. Remember, these tools have to be used in conjunction with redefine being turned on if you want to manipulate those. All right. Okay, that concludes our session on GraphCOGO.